In this video, a bunch of cups are knocked over. It shouldn't mean anything, it's just cups, but for this guy it was enough that he broke up with this girl.
But why?
Because he invested time and effort into putting these things up. It was an accomplishment, and he was proud to have invested his time into it. So while we might find it easy to dismiss this guy's feelings as irrelevant, it's just cups after all, that doesn't diminish how rude or insensitive this girl was in knocking them down.
When I started out with this show, I didn't know what to expect. Ponies, a colorful palette, and an overall atmosphere of friendship and kindness. This show was definitely a departure from the sci-fi, action, adventure, mystery thing that I was watching at the time, and from the very first episode I was hooked. I sat there and met Twilight Sparkle, saw her find friends, fight evil, and reunite sisters that had been separated for 1,000 years. This was a good show, a show that hooked me and dragged me headfirst through a decade-long adventure of the Everfree Forest, the various vendor halls of merch, and the thousands of hugs I've been able to give along the way. But this is all to say, Friendship is Magic had an immeasurable impact on my upbringing, and ended in a very heartfelt way that, while I think it could have been handled differently, I look back on with some very fond memories. The characters we met, the cultures they show, the world that started out so small only to expand well beyond the borders of Ponyville. I love this show. I love this world.
Oh, Hasbro, how could you? Hey, the creators of G5 put a lot of time and effort into this show. You need to stop being such a needy little man-child and—
Whoa, take down the temperature.
But the death threats, the booing, the harassment and bullying
are all wholeheartedly inappropriate and disappointing to see, but I, more than anyone, understand where it's coming from. There are and continue to be videos that I write about subjects that I would love to talk about someday, but for the moment they sit in my personal vault because they aren't fully baked. This video was one of those videos because I was livid at the way that Generation 5 was handled. So much so that by the end of the video, I rebuked the idea of getting thoughts in the comments about it. I still don't like Generation 5 and stopped watching after the first few episodes because just like Hello Pinkie Pie or Pony Life, it's a show that exists, but it just doesn't interest me. That's not to say that it can't be enjoyed or that it lacks creativity, but I know that it isn't the kind of show for me. It's the kind of show that could fade into obscurity, but instead made a lot of people mad, and I feel that it's important to understand that context if we actually want to bring down the temperature. Generation 5 had a chance to be something truly special. The movie presented Sunny Starscout in the coastal town of Maritime Bay. She was a curious and kind young mare who wanted to make friends with all the different kinds of ponies in the world that was divided. This premise alone was perfect. The animation was amazing, the setting was interesting, but the biggest problem came in the first few frames. This isn't their world, and if I'm being honest, I don't think it was ever intended to be. The way these 6 are shoehorned in feels like something the studio asked for after the creators had already written their world, their characters, and their overall plan for the seasons to come. And viewing this show through that lens, I kinda get what they were going for. I mean, a world where the magic was sealed away for many generations, a world of divided ponies trying to reintegrate with each other. Honestly speaking, when we got that premise back in Heartswarming Eve, I was intrigued. It's a good basis for a world and could have garnered the interest of a lot of people, but the biggest hurdle in appreciating that premise was— To understand this, we'll need to look back at another show, Adventure Time. All the way back in 2018, Adventure Time aired its final episodes. The characters took a bow and sang goodbye in the only way that they could, by showing us that the fun will never end. It was beautiful, but interestingly, the entire episode took place well after Finn and Jake, our main protagonists, had passed away. Think about that. Our main characters were long gone and to some extent forgotten, but strewn about this world were clear indications that the characters we met over the years left their marks. Statues of Finn and Jake falling to rubble, a room full of knickknacks of significance, and even a familiar face in a familiar place. This was a large time jump, but it was also a very loving and nostalgic time jump. The world was different, but in a way that makes sense with the characters, the kingdoms, and the creatures of the world. There is a story to be pieced together with these things, questions that could be raised that lead down multiple possible explanations. In contrast, look at these maps. Look at this architecture. Look at these characters. characters.
What? Time can change things. Big whoop.
While time can change things, it can never erase them. Magic or no, the stories of Heartswarming Eve should have persisted in some form. The yaks or the griffins or the hippogriffs were being integrated into pony society, but have yet to make an appearance. There are so many details of G4 that don't carry over to G5, and that's more than just lacking commitment to the G4 world, it's a flat out insult to the legacy of these characters. It would be one thing if we were starting out a new adventure with Sunny Starscout and her friends, but the premise of this show is that everything Twilight and Celestia and Starswirl accomplished over thousands of years was undone in their lifetimes. The world was thrust all the way back into heartswarming tribes, and worst of all, the only things that even hint at the G4 world are very direct cameos that barely last a couple of seconds. There's nothing to figure out, no breadcrumbs to even hint at how we got here. The very foundations of this world have long since eroded away until it became something completely unrecognizable, and that's probably because these characters were never intended to be in this world. As I said before, I think the G4 characters were shoehorned in by some soulless studio executives. Hasbro made their interest in maximizing profits over creativity and fandom more than apparent with the Wizards of the Coast controversy. And that same kind of soulless logic probably caused them to think that having a whole cast of characters thrust into a world that has nothing to do with them was a profitable idea.
People like G4, just have them in the new project. What do you mean it doesn't make any sense? Who cares? Just make it work. These characters tested well with audiences, so we gotta be in there, okay? Okay, bye!
The studio is more than likely the reason this show ended up the way it did, and because of that, I don't hold any ill will towards the creators, voice actors, writers, or staff of this series, but on a fundamental level, the way Hasbro shoehorned in these characters ruins an otherwise fitting end for this show by canonizing a world that almost entirely erases what came before. G4 fans spent years growing with these characters, building metaphorical towers of cups in their heads. The details, the world building, the magic system, and they were more than happy to use that tower to continue building into a new generation, to have the fun that never ends. But the tower was knocked over by a soulless corporate decision, and while it's just cups, it's just a silly show full of colorful ponies, and you can appreciate the new show for what it is, the memory of what was erased will always leave an impression on what comes afterwards. Some people have the peace of mind to move on from that, while others feel frustration and discontent. It's not wrong for anyone to feel the way that they do about this show, but we absolutely have a responsibility to be courteous and respectful about how we discuss these shows. And that brings me back to the death threats, harassment, belittling, and booing of show staff. This stretches well beyond the Brony fandom and needs to be understood by everyone. Don't be a dick. And make sure to call out when people around you are being rude, especially in the real world. The creatives behind any show are pouring hours of their time and dedication into something they love. Conventions are optional for these people, because believe it or not, they have full-time jobs to go back to. The fact that anyone in these industries are willing to spend time at conventions is for the fans more than for the creatives. Sure, they get compensation in some form, but who in their right mind would spend hours smiling, taking pictures, and signing some of the weirdest things in the world if they felt unsafe or unwelcomed? No one. Which is why convention staff, and more importantly, convention attendees, have a duty to create an environment where industry guests feel welcomed. Because if they don't, they'll stop going altogether, and that unwillingness to go to conventions stretches well beyond the industry guests you like. There are countless friends in the industry, and they all talk to each other. If the con scene seems unsafe for guests, or just doesn't seem worth going to, then that could reach the ears of some of your favorite guests. So even if you don't like someone's decisions or what they're taking part in, conventions should be a safe haven. Have some restraint and be respectful. Otherwise, there are very real costs to your behavior. But with all that said, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see all of you in the next video.